I stood alone in the pouring rain at my wife Elaine's funeral. None of our 3 adult children bothered to attend. After 47 years of marriage, I watched them lower her casket into the cold ground without any family beside me. Elaine fought cancer for 18 months before finally finding peace. As I placed roses on her casket, the crushing weight of solitude hit me. No children, no grandchildren, nobody. My moment of grief was interrupted by a text message from my son Jeffrey. "Dad, we need to discuss the house tomorrow. Be home at 9 a.m. I realized the battle for my life was only beginning. The drive home from the cemetery felt longer than usual. My hands trembled on the steering wheel as rain pelted the windshield, matching the tears streaming down my face. 47 years together, and now I was returning to an empty house. Our modest 2-story home sat at the end of Maple Street, the same house we'd purchased 35 years ago when the children were still young. The porch light cast a weak glow against the darkening sky as I pulled into the driveway. Everything looked the same, yet everything had changed. Inside, Elaine's presence lingered in every corner. Her reading glasses still sat on the end table beside her favorite armchair. The Afghan she'd crocheted during her first rounds of chemotherapy remained draped over the couch. The house smelled faintly of the lavender sachets she'd placed in every drawer and closet. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I tossed and turned in our bed, reaching for Elaine out of habit only to find empty space. Around 3 in the morning, I gave up trying to sleep and wandered into Elaine's study. She'd spent countless hours there during her illness, writing in her journal and organizing our affairs. I opened her desk drawer and found her leather-bound journal. The inscription on the first page read, "For Duke, who gave me a lifetime of happiness. May these words bring you comfort when I'm gone. Even in death." She was thinking of me. As I flipped through the pages, I found myself remembering our life together. We'd met in college, both of us working part-time jobs to pay tuition. We married right after graduation and struggled through those early years in a tiny apartment with second-hand furniture. I worked 2 jobs while Elaine finished her master's degree, and then she supported me when I started my own construction business. We'd built everything together, brick by brick. Our first home, my business, our family. Jeffrey arrived first, a serious child who grew into an even more serious man. Amanda followed 4 years later, headstrong and fiercely independent from the day she learned to walk. Thomas, our youngest, came as a surprise when Elaine was 41, completing our family. The children had been the center of our world. We'd poured everything into them, worked extra hours for their college funds, attended every recital and baseball game, celebrated every achievement. Where had we gone wrong? As adults, they'd grown increasingly distant, calling less frequently, visiting only on major holidays, and sometimes not even then. Each had successful careers, beautiful homes, and families of their own. Jeffrey became a corporate lawyer in Boston, Amanda a real estate agent in Chicago, and Thomas followed his brother into law, practicing in Philadelphia. They all lived within a few hours' drive, yet they couldn't make it to their mother's funeral. I must have dozed off in Elaine's chair because the doorbell startled me awake. Sunlight streamed through the windows. My watch read 9:15 a.m. I opened the front door to find all 3 of my children standing on the porch with their spouses. Jeffrey looked immaculate in a tailored suit, not a hair out of place. Amanda wore a designer outfit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Thomas hung back, eyes downcast, hands in his pockets. "Good morning, Dad," Jeffrey said, checking his watch. "We said 9 o'clock. I overslept," I replied, stepping aside to let them in. It was a difficult night. They filed past me without hugs or condolences, making their way to the living room as if attending a business meeting rather than visiting their childhood home the day after their mother's funeral. "Can I get anyone coffee?" I asked, desperately trying to maintain some normalcy. "No time, Dad," Jeffrey said, removing papers from his briefcase. "We need to discuss some practical matters." Amanda nodded in agreement. "We've been talking about what makes the most sense moving forward." "Moving forward," I repeated, still foggy from lack of sleep. "The house, Dad," Jeffrey clarified, gesturing around him. "This house is too big for just one person. It requires maintenance, yard work, Snow removal in winter. I've been maintaining this house for 35 years, I reminded him. Amanda leaned forward. Dad, do you have any idea what this property is worth now? The market in this area has exploded. We're talking $700,000. Minimum. I'm not interested in selling, I said firmly. Jeffrey and Amanda exchanged glances while Thomas continued to stare at the floor. We've actually consulted with an attorney about the estate, Jeffrey continued, sliding papers across the coffee table toward me. These documents would transfer the house into a trust for your benefit. We'd manage everything. I glanced at the paperwork without touching it. Your mother isn't even in the ground for 24 hours. And you're here with papers for me to sign? Dad, we're just trying to help, Amanda insisted. This is practical. Mom would have wanted us to take care of things efficiently. As I looked at the eager faces of my children, a cold realization washed over me. They hadn't come to comfort me or to mourn their mother. They had come for the house, for the money, for whatever they could get now that Elaine was gone. I need time to think, I said quietly. There's really nothing to think about, Jeffrey replied, pushing a pen toward me. We've handled everything. Just sign. I picked up the document and read the first paragraph. It would effectively transfer ownership of my home to my children immediately, while granting me the right to continue living there until I couldn't believe what I was reading. This says I can stay until I require assisted living or pass away, I said, looking up at them in disbelief. Who decides when I need assisted living? The silence in the room was deafening. I'm not signing this, I said, pushing the papers back across the coffee table. Jeffrey's face hardened. Dad, you're not thinking clearly. You're emotional right now, which is understandable, but these decisions need to be made. I'm perfectly capable of making my own decisions, I replied. And I've decided not to sign anything today. Amanda sighed dramatically. Dad, be reasonable. You're 72 years old, living alone for the first time in your life. You don't know how difficult it's going to be. Where were you? I asked quietly. What? Amanda looked confused. Where were you yesterday? Where were you during the 18 months your mother was dying? Uncomfortable silence filled the room. Jeffrey adjusted his tie. Amanda suddenly found her manicure fascinating. Thomas continued staring at the floor. We have busy lives, Dad, Jeffrey finally answered. Careers, children, responsibilities. Too busy to say goodbye to your mother? My voice cracked. Too busy to help during the worst months of her life? I bathed her, fed her, changed her bedding when she was too weak to get up. I drove her to every appointment, sat with her through every treatment. Where were you? We called, Amanda said defensively. Amanda called twice, I corrected her. Jeffrey spoke to your mother once, 3 months ago. Thomas sent flowers when she entered hospice. That's not fair, Jeffrey protested. We have obligations, commitments. So did I replied. I was committed to your mother for nearly 5 decades. In sickness and in health, remember? I stood up and walked to the mantel, running my fingers over the framed family photos. Happy times that now seemed like a distant dream. Your mother asked about you every day, even when the pain medications made her confused. She wanted to know if you'd called, if you were coming to visit. I made excuses for you. I told her you were busy but sending your love. I lied to her because the truth would have broken her heart. Amanda's eyes filled with tears, but Jeffrey remained stoic. Dad, this isn't productive, he said. We're here to discuss the house. The house, I repeated. You couldn't be bothered to attend your mother's funeral, but you made sure to be here bright and early to discuss the house. We're trying to protect your assets, Jeffrey insisted. My assets, I emphasized. Mine and your mother's, not yours. I walked around the living room, noticing for the first time that small things were out of place. The china cabinet door was slightly ajar. The drawer in the hallway table was partially open. Have you been through the house already? I asked, realization dawning. Thomas finally spoke up. Amanda wanted to take some measurements. Measurements? I turned to my daughter. For what exactly? Amanda had the decency to look embarrassed. Just to get a sense of the space. For planning purposes. I opened the hallway drawer and found that your mother's jewelry box, which she kept there, had been opened. The diamond earrings I'd given her for our 40th anniversary were missing. Where are your mother's earrings? Amanda's hand went instinctively to her ears, which were bare. I was just borrowing them, Dad. to remember her by. Without asking, I felt sick to my stomach. You went through our home while I was at the funeral? No one answered. Why now? I demanded. Why this sudden interest in the house, in my welfare? Thomas cleared his throat. Dad, we're worried about you. Are you? I challenged him. Or is there something else going on? The three of them exchanged glances, some unspoken communication passing between them. Just tell him, Thomas said to his siblings. This isn't right. Jeffrey shot Thomas a warning look. But my youngest son continued. The truth is, Dad, we all have financial situations that could use some relief. The housing market is at a peak right now. The timing is good. You want to sell my home because you need money, I stated flatly. It's more complicated than that, Jeffrey began. It's exactly that simple. I cut him off. You're in financial trouble, so your solution is to take my house from under me while your mother's body is still warm. Dad, Amanda gasped. Please leave, I said quietly. Dad, be reasonable, Jeffrey insisted. Get out of my house, I repeated, louder this time. Now, they gathered their things slowly, Jeffrey stuffing the unsigned papers back into his briefcase. As they moved toward the door, Amanda reached into her purse. A folded paper fell out, which I quickly picked up. What's this? I asked, unfolding what appeared to be a real estate listing. Amanda tried to snatch it back, but I held it out of reach. It was a printout of senior living communities, with one circled in red marker. You already have a place picked out for me, I said incredulously. You were planning to sell the house and move me into a facility. It's a very nice community, Amanda said weakly. You have 48 hours to think about our offer, Jeffrey said from the doorway. After that, we'll need to explore other options. What other options? I asked. Legal options, he replied coldly. Competency hearings, power of attorney. There are ways to manage estates when elderly parents become difficult. The threat hung in the air between us. 48 hours, Dad, Jeffrey repeated before leading his siblings out the door. I stood in the entryway of my home, listening to the engines of their expensive cars as they backed out of the driveway. In the space of 24 hours, I'd buried my wife and discovered that my children were strangers. After my children left, I sat in stunned silence in the living room. The house that had always been filled with love now felt tainted by their greed. How had it come to this? Where had Elaine and I gone wrong in raising them? I returned to Elaine's study, seeking some connection to her. Her journal lay where I'd left it earlier that morning. I picked it up, needing her wisdom more than ever. Flipping through the pages, I began to read entries from the past few years. Elaine had documented her concerns about our children's changing attitudes, their increasing distance, their preoccupation with status and material things. Jeffrey called today. One entry from 2 years ago read, not to check on me, but to ask for $20,000 for a home renovation. Duke doesn't know. I told Jeffrey we'd think about it, but I'll probably send it. It seems the only way to get our children to contact us these days is when they need something. Another entry, dated 6 months later. Amanda visited for an hour. She spent most of the time showing photos of her friend's vacation home and hinting that they might look for something similar if they had family support. I wonder if she remembers how we scrimped and saved for her. College tuition, never taking vacations ourselves. The entries became more frequent and more worried as her illness progressed. Thomas called to ask about our will again. This is the 3rd time in 2 months. I told him everything is in order, but he seemed disappointed. Duke suspects nothing. I haven't told him about the loans to the children that were never repaid. I don't want to break his heart. I felt a stab of betrayal. Elaine had been keeping secrets from me, protecting me from knowing how our children had been taking advantage of her. Then I noticed something odd in her more recent entries, written during her final months. She began making cryptic references to a safeguard and a protection plan. There were clues, almost like a treasure hunt, references to where life begins and the promise of spring. When I'm gone, Duke will need what I've prepared. It's hidden where we first planted hope together, where life takes root and grows. When the children show their true colors, he'll find what he needs beneath the promise of spring. I sat back, pondering her words. Where we first planted hope together. The garden. When we bought this house, The first thing Elaine had wanted to do was plant a garden in the backyard. We'd spent that first weekend digging beds and planting vegetables and flowers. She'd called it our hope garden because it represented our future in this home. Despite my exhaustion, I grabbed a flashlight and headed to the backyard. Night had fallen, and a light drizzle was still coming down. The garden had been Elaine's domain, especially in recent years when my knees made kneeling difficult. She'd maintained it even during the early stages of her illness, saying it gave her purpose. In the corner of the garden stood an ornamental cherry tree we'd planted on our 25th anniversary. The promise of spring, Elaine always called it, because it was the first thing to bloom each year. I knelt beside the tree, my knees protesting, and began to dig with a small garden trowel. About 2 feet down, the tool hit something solid. I cleared away more dirt to reveal a waterproof document box. With trembling hands, I carried it inside and placed it on the kitchen table. Inside was a USB drive, a folder of legal documents, and a sealed envelope with my name written in Elaine's elegant handwriting. I opened the letter first. My dearest Duke, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and our children have likely shown you who they've become. I've tried to shield you from this painful truth, but I've also prepared you to face it. Over the past decade, our children have borrowed more than $300,000 from us, mostly from my inheritance from my parents. None of these loans have been repaid despite promises. Jeffrey needed money for gambling debts he hid from his wife. Amanda's real estate business failed twice, though she told us the money was for her children's education. Thomas used our generosity to finance a lifestyle beyond his means. I've documented everything on the enclosed USB drive, detailed records of each transaction, copies of emails and text messages. There are also recordings of conversations where they discussed taking the house once I was gone. Yes, Duke, they've been planning this for years. I know this will break your heart as it broke mine, but you must protect yourself now. I've taken steps to ensure they can't take advantage of you, but you'll need to be strong, stronger than I was. I couldn't bear to confront them, to see the truth of what they'd become. That was my failing. The legal documents in this box include our updated will and trust information. I made changes with the help of attorney Patricia Wilson. She knows everything. Call her. Remember that not all family is bound by blood. Look to our true friends now, and know that I love you, always. Forever yours, Elaine. I sat at the kitchen table until dawn, reading through the documents and viewing the files on the USB drive. Elaine had been meticulous in her documentation. There were loan agreements the children had signed but never honored, bank records showing transfers to their accounts, audio recordings of phone conversations where they discussed their financial problems and plans to convince Mom to help them once more. Most disturbing were recordings from the past year, apparently made when they visited while I was out picking up Elaine's medications. Jeffrey's voice. Once Mom's gone, Dad won't last long on his own. He's never even paid a bill. We'll need to move quickly to get the house before he does something stupid like remarry or give the money away. Amanda, the market will be perfect next year. I already have buyers interested in this neighborhood. Thomas, sounding hesitant. Shouldn't we at least wait a decent interval after Mom passes? Jeffrey, we can't afford to wait. My situation is critical, and you're not much better off. As the sun rose on my second day without Elaine, I felt something shift inside me. The grief was still there, a hollow ache in my chest, but alongside it grew a new emotion, resolve. Elaine had given me one final gift, the truth, painful as it was, and the tools to protect myself. I thought back to our early years together, when we'd faced every challenge side by side. Elaine had always been the stronger one, the planner, the protector. Now it was my turn to be strong, not just for myself but for her memory. I picked up the phone and dialed Patricia Wilson's number. Patricia Wilson agreed to see me that afternoon. I spent the morning reviewing more of the documents Elaine had left for me, each revelation more painful than the last. The USB drive contained folders meticulously labeled and dated. One folder was titled Financial Manipulations and contained spreadsheets tracking money given to our children, along with their promises of repayment that never materialized. Jeffrey had received the most, nearly $150,000 over 8 years. The largest amount, $60,000, had been transferred just 3 years ago, with a note in Elaine's spreadsheet. Jeffrey gambling crisis. Promised repayment within 1 year. Amanda had taken almost $100,000, primarily in 2 large chunks when her real estate business struggled during market downturns. Her file included emails where she'd claimed the money was for her children's private school tuition and medical expenses. Thomas had borrowed less, about $50,000, but his transgressions seemed different in nature. Elaine had documented instances where bills arrived for credit cards we never opened. Copies of credit applications showed our information with Thomas listed as an authorized user. Identity theft by our own son. I felt physically ill. How had Elaine shouldered this burden alone? Why hadn't she told me? A text message from Jeffrey interrupted my thoughts. Have you made your decision? We need an answer by tomorrow morning. I didn't respond. At 2 o'clock, I drove to Patricia Wilson's law office downtown. She was a slender woman in her 60s with silver hair and kind eyes behind stylish glasses. As I entered her office, she rose and extended her hand. Mr. Harmon, I'm so sorry about Elaine. She was an extraordinary woman. Thank you, I said, taking a seat across from her desk. I only just discovered how extraordinary. Patricia nodded solemnly. She wanted to protect you from pain, but she also wanted to ensure you were protected after she was gone. She never told me about the money, about what the children were doing, I said. She struggled with that decision, Patricia replied. But in the end, she felt you had enough to deal with caring for her through the illness. She didn't want to add to your burden. And now they want the house, I told her, explaining the visit from my children and the documents they'd tried to get me to sign. Patricia's expression hardened. Elaine anticipated this, unfortunately. She told me they'd been asking questions about the will, about the house, even while she was in the worst stages of her treatment. What did she do? I asked. Her letter mentioned changes to our will and trust. Patricia opened a file on her desk. 2 months before she passed, Elaine made significant changes. Your previous will had been straightforward. The house and all assets would be divided equally among your children after both of you were gone. She handed me a document. This is the amended will and trust agreement. Elaine transferred most of your joint assets into a trust with you as the sole beneficiary and trustee. The children will receive nominal inheritances of $5,000 each, but only after you've passed. They'll contest it, I said. They can try, Patricia replied. But Elaine was very careful. She underwent cognitive evaluations to document her mental capacity. We videotaped the will signing. She left a detailed letter explaining her reasons, including the unpaid loans and financial manipulations. What about the house? The house is now in the trust. You have complete control. They cannot force you to sell or move out. I felt a wave of relief, followed immediately by sadness. I never thought I'd need protection from my own children. Patricia reached across the desk and patted my hand. Elaine struggled with this reality too, but she was determined that you wouldn't face what so many elderly people do: financial abuse by family members. On my way home, I stopped to see my old friend Martin Lewis. Martin and I had worked construction together before I started my own company, and we'd remained close over the decades. He was a widower himself, having lost his wife Jean to breast cancer 5 years earlier. Martin listened without interruption as I told him everything: the funeral, the children's demands, Elaine's hidden documents. I wish I could say I'm surprised, he said when I finished. But Jean and I noticed changes in your kids years ago. Remember when we all used to get together for summer barbecues? Over time, your 3 stopped coming. Too busy, too important. I didn't see it, I admitted. Or I didn't want to see it. You and Elaine were always making excuses for them, Martin said gently. It's what parents do. But I'm glad Elaine finally took steps to protect you. I need your help understanding some of these financial records, I told him. You were always better with numbers than me. Martin had been an accountant before retirement, and he agreed to come over the next day to go through everything. When I returned home, I found my neighbor Carol waiting on my porch with a casserole dish. I thought you might need some dinner, she said, handing me the dish. It's just lasagna, nothing fancy. Carol and her husband Ted had moved in next door about 10 years ago. They'd become good friends, especially during Elaine's illness, when Carol would bring over meals or sit with Elaine so I could run errands. Thank you, I said, genuinely touched. Would you like to come in for a bit? Over coffee at my kitchen table, Carol hesitantly brought up something that had been bothering her. "Duke, I don't want to overstep, but there's something you should know. A few times when you were at the pharmacy, I came over to sit with Elaine, and your children would show up minutes after you left. It seemed coordinated." "What happened during these visits?" I asked. Carol looked uncomfortable. "They'd ask Elaine to sign things. Once, I heard Jeffrey tell her it was just routine paperwork for the business. Nothing to bother you with." Elaine seemed confused that day. She was on heavy medication. "Did she sign?" "Not while I was there. I actually suggested they wait until you returned, and Jeffrey became quite upset. After that, they would ask me to leave when they arrived, saying they needed private family time." This new information hit me hard. They had tried to take advantage of Elaine's weakened condition, possibly getting her to sign documents while medicated. "Did you tell me this at the time?" I couldn't remember. "I mentioned it once," Carol said. "You told me the children were helping with insurance paperwork. I wanted to believe that was true." I thanked Carol for her honesty and for being a true friend to Elaine. After she left, I returned to the USB drive, searching for any evidence of documents Elaine might have signed during her illness. In a folder labeled Attempted Fraud, I found scanned copies of papers with Elaine's signature, alongside notes she'd written. Signed while on morphine, Jeffrey claimed insurance documents, actually power of attorney, and Amanda brought quitclaim deed, said it was hospital billing authorization. My own children had tried to trick their dying mother into signing away her rights and property. The depth of their betrayal was unfathomable. That evening, Martin called to check on me. During our conversation, he mentioned his daughter Sarah, who worked as an attorney specializing in elder law. "You should talk to her, Duke," he suggested. "What your kids are doing attempting to take your house, threatening competency hearings, that's elder abuse. Plain and simple." "I have Patricia," I said, Elaine's attorney. "Patricia is excellent for estate matters," Martin agreed. "But Sarah deals specifically with these kinds of family situations. She can help you understand all your options, including potential legal actions against your children if it comes to that." "Legal actions? You mean sue my own kids?" "I mean protect yourself by any means necessary," Martin said firmly. That's what Elaine wanted. I agreed to meet with Sarah the following day. As I hung up, I realized it had been just 2 days since Elaine's funeral. In those 2 days, my understanding of my family had been completely shattered and rebuilt. The children I thought I knew were strangers, motivated by greed rather than love. Yet alongside this painful recognition came something unexpected. Friends like Martin, Carol, and Ted were stepping up, offering support and protection. Even Patricia, who had been Elaine's confidant, was now looking out for me. Perhaps family wasn't defined by blood after all, but by love, respect, and care. Actions, not relations. It was a hard lesson to learn at 72, but Elaine had ensured I wouldn't learn it alone. The next morning, I woke with a sense of purpose. Today was the deadline Jeffrey had given me to accept their offer. Instead of preparing to surrender my home, I was preparing to fight. Martin arrived early, bringing bagels and coffee. "Thought you might not feel like cooking," he said as I let him in. We spent the morning at my kitchen table, going through Elaine's financial records. Martin's accounting expertise proved invaluable as he organized the information into clear, understandable summaries. "Duke, this is worse than you thought," he said, pointing to his calculations. "When you add up all the loans, unauthorized credit card charges, and direct withdrawals they made from your accounts, your children have taken over $350,000 from you and Elaine in the last decade." "How did I not notice?" I asked, stunned by the total. "Most of it came from Elaine's inheritance from her parents," Martin explained. "She kept those funds in separate accounts that you probably didn't monitor closely. The rest was taken in smaller amounts that wouldn't immediately raise flags, and none of it was repaid. Not a penny," Martin confirmed, despite signed loan agreements for most of the larger amounts. At noon, we drove to meet Sarah Lewis at her law office. Sarah had her father's kind eyes but a fierce demeanor that immediately put me at ease. This was someone who would fight for her clients. "Dad told me what's happening," she said after introductions. "I'm glad you came to see me. What your children are attempting is textbook elder financial abuse. They're coming back today," I told her. "They expect an answer about the house." Sarah nodded. Based on what you've told me, they're likely to escalate when you refuse. Threats about competency hearings are a common tactic, designed to frighten you into compliance. Can they actually do that? I asked. Have me declared incompetent? It's extremely difficult without legitimate grounds, Sarah assured me. You're clearly of sound mind, physically capable of managing your affairs, and have a support network of friends. Plus, Patricia has already documented your competency as part of the trust setup. What should I do when they arrive? Sarah leaned forward. First, do not meet with them alone. Have witnesses present, friends, neighbors, me, or my father. Second, consider recording the conversation. Maine is a one-party consent state, meaning you can legally record conversations you participate in without informing the other parties. She handed me a small digital recorder. This looks like a pen, easy to operate, excellent sound quality, and if they threaten legal action, let them, Sarah said confidently. They have no case. But you, on the other hand, have substantial evidence of financial exploitation, which is both a civil and criminal matter. I felt a chill. Criminal? You mean they could go to jail? Sarah's expression softened. That would be a worst-case scenario, and entirely up to you whether to pursue criminal charges. Many of my clients just want the exploitation to stop and perhaps some restitution. The threat of legal consequences is often enough to end the abusive behavior. On the drive home, I thought about what Elaine would want. She had gone to great lengths to document our children's actions but had kept it all secret while she was alive. She'd protected them from consequences until the end. But she'd also made sure I would have the evidence and resources to protect myself after she was gone. The more I learned, the more I understood why. As we pulled into my driveway, I noticed an unfamiliar car parked in front of my house, alongside Jeffrey's Mercedes and Amanda's BMW. They brought reinforcements, I said to Martin. So did you, he replied with a reassuring smile. Inside, I found my 3 children in the living room, with a man in an expensive suit I didn't recognize. Dad, Jeffrey began without preamble, this is Randall Whitfield, our attorney. Since you wouldn't answer my texts, we assumed you needed more time to consider our proposal. I don't need more time, I said calmly. My answer is no. I will not be signing over my house to you or anyone else. Jeffrey's face hardened. Dad, be reasonable. I believe your father is being entirely reasonable, Martin interjected. And who might you be? Whitfield asked. Martin Lewis, family friend, he replied. I'm here to support Duke. Whitfield opened his briefcase. Mr. Harmon, your children are concerned about your welfare, living alone in this large house after your wife's passing. They believe a transition to a more supportive living environment would benefit you. They're concerned about my welfare, I repeated slowly. Is that why none of them attended their mother's funeral? Is that why they haven't offered a single word of condolence since she died? Is that why they're demanding my home less than 3 days after burying their mother? Whitfield looked uncomfortable. I'm sure there are complex emotions at play here. There certainly are, I agreed. Let me simplify things. I reached into my pocket and activated the recorder pen. I am not selling my house. I am not transferring ownership to my children. I am not moving into assisted living or anywhere else. Dad, Amanda cut in, you're not thinking clearly. Mom's death has affected your judgment. My judgment is perfectly sound, I replied. In fact, I've recently reviewed some very interesting financial records your mother kept. The room went silent. Records? Thomas asked. Speaking for the first time, I turned to face my children. Your mother documented everything. Every loan, every withdrawal, every time you used her illness to manipulate more money from us. She knew what you were doing, and she made sure I would know too. Jeffrey's face went pale. What are you talking about? I directed my next comment to Whitfield. Did my children inform you that they've taken over $350,000 from their parents through loans they never repaid and, in some cases, fraud? Whitfield glanced sharply at Jeffrey. That's not true, Jeffrey sputtered. Mom offered that money as gifts. I have the loan agreements you signed, I said quietly. I have recordings of conversations where you discussed repayment terms. I have documentation of credit cards opened in our names with you as authorized users. Mr. Whitfield, I continued, Are you aware that attempting to pressure an elderly person into transferring property, particularly using threats of competency hearings, can constitute elder abuse under Maine law? Whitfield began gathering his papers. I think we need to step back and reassess the situation. That's the first sensible thing anyone said, Martin commented. Jeffrey stood up, face flushed with anger. Don't threaten us, Dad. We can make things very difficult for you. No, Jeffrey, I replied, standing to face my son. I'm not threatening. I'm setting boundaries. This is my home, paid for with the sweat of my labor and your mother's careful management. You have no right to it, legally or morally. I looked at each of my children in turn. You've taken advantage of our generosity for years. Your mother shielded you from consequences because she loved you. She couldn't bear to see what you'd become. I don't have that luxury anymore. So what now? Amanda asked, her voice small. Now you leave, I said firmly, and you consider your options carefully. Patricia Wilson has updated our will and trust. The house and our assets are protected. If you pursue legal action, I'll be forced to counter with evidence of financial exploitation. You'd sue your own children? Jeffrey looked incredulous. I'd protect myself from people who tried to steal from me and their dying mother. I corrected him. The fact that you're my children makes it worse, not better. Whitfield placed a restraining hand on Jeffrey's arm as he started to reply. I think we should continue this discussion another time, when emotions aren't so high. There's nothing to discuss, I said. My decision is final. As they gathered their things to leave, I noticed Thomas hanging back. When the others had stepped outside, he approached me. Dad, I'm sorry about Mom, about not being there. I wanted to embrace him, to find some fragment of the boy I'd raised in this troubled man. But the wounds were too fresh. Actions speak louder than words, Thomas. If you're truly sorry, prove it. He nodded sadly and followed his siblings out. After they'd gone, Martin clapped me on the shoulder. You did well, Duke. Elaine would be proud. For the first time since her death, I felt a sense of peace. I had honored her final wishes. I had stood up for myself, just as she'd wanted me to do. That evening, I received a call from Patricia Wilson. Duke, there's something else Elaine wanted you to know. Now that you've taken these first steps, can you come to my office tomorrow morning? What is it? I asked. Something good, she promised. A final gift from Elaine. I slept better that night than I had since Elaine's diagnosis. Something had shifted inside me, a quiet strength I hadn't known I possessed. The confrontation with my children had been painful, but necessary, like lancing a wound to begin healing. The next morning, I arrived at Patricia Wilson's office precisely at 10. She greeted me with a warm smile and led me to a small conference room where a television had been set up. Elaine recorded this about a month before she passed, Patricia explained, inserting a DVD. She asked that I show it to you only after you'd discovered the truth about the children and taken steps to protect yourself. Patricia left me alone as the screen flickered to life. Elaine's face appeared, gaunt from her illness but with eyes still bright with intelligence and love. My heart clenched at the sight of her. Hello, my darling Duke, she began. If you're watching this, I'm gone, and you've found the documents I left for you. I'm so sorry you had to learn the truth about our children this way. It broke my heart to see what they became, despite all the love we gave them. She paused, gathering strength. I know you're hurt and confused. You're wondering where we went wrong, what we could have done differently. I've asked myself those questions 1,000 times. The truth is, we gave them everything we had, all our love, our time, our resources. The choices they made as adults were their own. Elaine shifted slightly, wincing with pain before continuing. I couldn't confront them while I was alive. Maybe that was cowardice on my part. Or maybe I just couldn't bear to see the final breakdown of our family during my last days. But I couldn't leave you unprotected, vulnerable to their greed after I was gone. Her eyes filled with tears that she quickly wiped away. You've always been the gentle one, Duke. The optimist who sees the best in everyone, especially our children. I love that about you. But now you need to be strong, not just for yourself, but for what we built together. She smiled then, a secret smile I hadn't seen in years. Which brings me to my final surprise. Do you remember our dream? The little cottage on Clearwater Lake? The one we saw 10 years ago and couldn't afford because we'd just paid for Amanda's wedding. My breath caught. We had fallen in love with a small cottage on the lake about an hour from our home. We'd talked about buying it as a retirement getaway, but between the children's needs and eventually Elaine's medical bills, it had remained just a dream. "I bought it, Duke," she said, her smile widening. "With my mother's final inheritance that came through last year, the one I told you was much smaller than it actually was. The cottage is yours, now our dream home for your new beginning." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Patricia has all the details. It's been fully renovated, furnished, and is ready for you whenever you want to see it. I kept it secret because I wanted it to be your sanctuary after I was gone, somewhere untouched by the children's greed, unknown to them, where you could find peace. Tears streamed down my face as Elaine continued. "This isn't just about the house, Duke. It's about your future. I don't want you to become bitter or lonely. Build a new life there. Make new friends. Maybe even find love again someday." She leaned closer to the camera. "And now, I need to speak to our children. If they're watching this with you, which I doubt, they need to hear some hard truths." Elaine's tone changed, becoming firmer. "Jeffrey, Amanda, Thomas, I loved you from the moment you were born, and I love you still, but I am deeply disappointed in the adults you've become. Your father and I taught you better than this. We raised you to be honest, hardworking, and compassionate. Somewhere along the way, you lost those values." She paused, collecting herself. "You've taken so much from us, not just money, but trust and respect. The loans you never repaid, the exploitation of my illness, the absence when we needed you most. These choices have consequences. I've documented everything, not out of vindictiveness, but to protect your father. I hope someday you'll recognize what you've done and make amends. Not for my sake, it's too late for that, but for your own. The path you're on leads only to emptiness, no matter how much money or property you acquire." Her voice softened. "Back to you, my love. This cottage is your fresh start. Use it well. Live the life we planned together, even if I can't be there to share it. That's my final wish for you." The screen went dark, and I sat in silence, overwhelmed by emotions. Grief and loss mingled with gratitude and amazement. Even at the end, Elaine had been thinking ahead, planning, protecting, loving. Patricia returned with a folder containing information about the cottage keys, deed, recent photographs, and maintenance records. She was quite secretive about this project, Patricia told me. She'd visit during your bowling nights, supervising renovations and choosing furnishings. The photos showed a charming 2-bedroom cottage with a wide porch overlooking the lake. Simple, comfortable furniture, a stone fireplace, floor-to-ceiling windows capturing the view. "It's about an hour's drive from here," Patricia said. "Would you like to see it today?" I nodded, unable to speak through my tears. Patricia drove me herself, talking quietly about Elaine's vision for the place as we traveled the winding country roads. "She wanted it to be your haven," Patricia explained. "She knew the children would likely make claims on your current house, so she created this alternative that they knew nothing about." The cottage was even more beautiful in person. Situated on a wooded lot with 100 feet of lakefront, it offered privacy and tranquility. Inside, every detail showed Elaine's touch from the blue and green color scheme we'd always favored to the bookshelves filled with our favorite authors. On the mantel stood framed photos of Elaine and me throughout our marriage, but none of the children. A deliberate choice, I realized. This place was about our love story, not our family disappointments. In the master bedroom, I found a note propped against the lamp on what would have been Elaine's nightstand. "Welcome home, my love. Be happy here. E." I spent hours exploring the cottage, discovering Elaine's thoughtful touches everywhere. The kitchen was stocked with staples. The garage contained fishing gear and a small boat. A garden shed held tools and seedlings in cold storage, ready for spring planting. By the time Patricia and I left, I knew I would be moving there soon. Not fleeing my family home in defeat, but embracing a new chapter Elaine had lovingly prepared for me. When I returned home that evening, I found Thomas sitting on my porch steps. "Dad," he said, standing as I approached. "Can we talk?" I hesitated, then nodded. unlocking the door and gesturing him inside. In the living room, Thomas seemed unable to meet my eyes. "I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about proving I'm sorry. And you were right. About everything." He took a deep breath. "I was the one who saw Mom's medical records first. I knew how serious it was before you did, before she did. Instead of coming home to help, I used that information to secure one last loan." The admission hit me like a physical blow. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I can't live with it anymore," he said, finally looking at me. "Jeffrey and Amanda are still plotting ways to get the house. They've convinced themselves they're entitled to it, that you're being unreasonable. But I can't do it anymore. What do you want from me, Thomas? Forgiveness? Absolution?" He shook his head. "I don't deserve either. I just want a chance to make amends. Somehow." I studied my youngest son, seeing glimpses of the thoughtful boy he'd once been. "Actions, Thomas, not words." "I know," he replied. "I'll pay back everything I took, with interest. It will take time, but I'll do it. And I want no part of any schemes to take your house or anything else from you." We talked for another hour. Thomas revealed the extent of Jeffrey's gambling problems and Amanda's financial mismanagement. He admitted his own weakness in following their lead, rather than standing up for what was right. Before he left, I showed him photos of the lake cottage. "Mom bought this?" he asked, clearly surprised. "Your mother was full of surprises," I replied. "I'll be moving there soon." "It's beautiful," he said. "You'll be happy there." "I plan to be," I agreed. Thomas paused at the door. "Can I visit sometime?" "Not right away. I understand you need time. But maybe someday?" It was the first request from any of my children that wasn't about taking something from me. "Someday," I said, "if you prove yourself trustworthy." After he left, I sat in Elaine's study, feeling her presence strongly. "You were right," I said aloud, "about everything. But maybe there's hope for one of them after all." I couldn't be certain if Thomas's contrition was genuine or just another manipulation. Only time would tell. But for the first time since Elaine's death, I felt a flicker of hope for reconciliation, at least with one child. More importantly, I felt hope for myself, for a future I never could have imagined just days ago. A future Elaine had carefully, lovingly crafted for me from beyond death's threshold. 1 year has passed since I stood alone in the rain at Elaine's funeral. 1 year of profound changes, hard lessons, and unexpected blessings. I moved to the lake cottage 3 weeks after discovering its existence. The decision wasn't an escape, but an embracing of the gift Elaine had given me, a fresh start in a place unsullied by painful memories or family conflicts. The first few months were challenging, adjusting to life without Elaine, learning to live alone after nearly 5 decades of partnership, navigating the practical aspects of widowhood tax changes, insurance matters, closing accounts in her name. Patricia Wilson and Sarah Lewis were invaluable during this transition, helping me understand legal and financial matters that Elaine had always handled. Martin visited weekly, sometimes staying overnight in the guest room, bringing news from our old neighborhood and providing male companionship I hadn't realized I needed. Spring came to the lake in a progression of blossoms and birdsong. I planted the garden Elaine had planned, following her detailed sketches and notes. As my hands worked the soil, I often felt her presence beside me, guiding my choices, celebrating each new shoot and bud. I met my neighbors as the weather warmed. Jack and Louise Sullivan, retired teachers who lived in the cottage to my left. The Petersons, a young family with 3 small children on my right, who invited me to weekend barbecues and taught me to paddleboard despite my initial reluctance. By summer, I'd established routines that sustained me. Morning coffee on the porch, watching the mist rise from the lake, afternoons spent fishing or working in the garden, evenings with books from Elaine's carefully curated shelves. It wasn't the life we'd planned together, but it was a good life, infused with her love and foresight. In July, I received a letter from Thomas, the first communication from any of my children since his visit. He enclosed a check for $5,000, the first installment on repaying what he'd taken. His letter detailed changes he was making, separating his finances from his siblings, attending Gamblers Anonymous with Jeffrey, who was resistant but participating, seeking therapy to understand his choices. I called him after receiving the letter. Our conversation was awkward but honest. I told him about the lake cottage, about my new friends, about the garden. He shared news of his children, my grandchildren, whom I barely knew. We agreed to meet in August, neutral ground, a restaurant halfway between his home and mine. That meeting led to others. Thomas began bringing his children, Tyler, age 12, and Emma, age 9. They were wary at first, these grandchildren who were essentially strangers to me. But children adapt quickly. Soon they were helping me with the garden, learning to fish, discovering the joy of evening bonfires by the lake. Thomas kept his word, sending monthly payments, maintaining appropriate boundaries. His wife, Susan, whom I'd always liked but barely knew, became an ally in rebuilding our relationship. She later confessed that she'd been uncomfortable with how her husband and his siblings treated Elaine and me, but had felt powerless to intervene. Jeffrey and Amanda remained estranged. They made one final attempt to claim the family home, filing a lawsuit alleging undue influence by Elaine's attorney. The case was quickly dismissed when Sarah presented evidence of their financial exploitation. The judge's rebuke was scathing, suggesting they were fortunate not to face criminal charges. I sold the family home in October, not out of fear but because it was time. The house deserved a new family, new memories, new life. A young couple with twins purchased it, enchanted by the garden Elaine had lovingly tended for decades. I left them detailed notes about the perennials, when they bloomed, what care they needed, continuing Elaine's legacy in a small but meaningful way. The proceeds from the sale went into a trust. Most would eventually go to Thomas's children for education, and to a foundation I established in Elaine's name supporting cancer patients who lacked family support. The rest ensured my financial security for whatever years remained to me. Winter at the lake brought new joys. The stark beauty of snow-laden pines, ice fishing with Jack Sullivan, holiday celebrations with the Petersons and their extended family, who adopted me as an honorary grandfather. Through Martin, I connected with other widowers in the area. We formed an informal support group, meeting weekly for coffee or meals. No agenda, just men of a certain age, sharing experiences, offering advice, providing companionship. We called ourselves the Second Chapter Club, with gentle self-deprecation. As spring returned to the lake, I realized how much healing had occurred in a single year. The raw wound of Elaine's loss had transformed into a tender scar, still sensitive but no longer debilitating. The betrayal by my children had resolved into acceptance. Jeffrey and Amanda had chosen their path, while Thomas was working to forge a new one. Today marks the anniversary of Elaine's funeral. I began the day at her grave, placing fresh flowers and sharing quiet words about my new life. Then I returned to the lake cottage to prepare for guests: Martin and his daughters Sarah, Jack and Louise, the Petersons, Thomas and his family, and several members of the Second Chapter Club. As I stand on the porch watching the sunset paint the lake in golds and crimsons, I'm overwhelmed with gratitude, not just for Elaine's final gift of this place, but for the wisdom that guided her actions. She knew I would need more than financial security. I would need purpose, community, beauty, and the opportunity for reconciliation where possible. In her final message to me, Elaine said she wanted this cottage to be my sanctuary for a new beginning. It has become that and more. It's the foundation for a life I never expected but have grown to cherish. The sound of car doors and voices interrupts my reflection. My guests are arriving for the small celebration I've planned, an acknowledgement of endings and beginnings, loss and renewal, grief and joy. Thomas is the first up the steps, his children racing ahead to show their mother the new paddle boat Jack helped me purchase. "Happy anniversary, Dad," Thomas says quietly, embracing me. We both understand what he means, not a celebration of Elaine's death, but a recognition of the journey this year has been. As everyone gathers on the porch and lawn, glasses raised in a toast to Elaine's memory, I see the family she helped me create after our first family fractured, not bound by blood but by choice, by mutual care and respect, by shared experiences and genuine affection. To Elaine, Martin calls out, who even in leaving, showed us how to live. To Elaine, the chorus responds. As darkness falls, we light a bonfire by the lake. The conversations and laughter continue, but I find moments of quiet observation. watching this unlikely gathering of people who have become my support system, my community, my chosen family. Elaine was right. Family isn't defined by blood but by love and respect. Sometimes the family you're born into or create fails you. But if you're open to it, a new family forms around you, drawn by mutual needs and genuine caring. That's the lesson Elaine left me. More valuable than the cottage or any material possession. The understanding that it's never too late to stand up for yourself, to set boundaries, to forge new connections, to begin again. As I watched Tyler teaching one of the Peterson children how to roast the perfect marshmallow, I silently thank Elaine for this final, precious gift, the courage to embrace this unexpected life, and the wisdom to recognize its value. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after loss or betrayal? What gave you the strength to start over? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story touched you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that second chapters can be beautiful, even when they weren't what we planned. Thank you for listening, and I wish you all the courage to stand up for yourselves and the wisdom to recognize true family when you find it.